Thank you very much, Ernie. Congratulations on that 51 years. That's a long time without drinking. Um, I thank you guys for inviting me. Again, my name is Paige Wood, and I'm from the Rocky Mount, North Carolina area. My sobriety birth date is March the 31st, 1989. There's a lot of people that can't believe that I've been sober almost 35 years, including ex-employees and highway patrolmen and many of the local bars. I didn't think about it till the other day when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. That was probably the best place to go because I had been kicked out and permanently barred from all the drinking places in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. They wouldn't let me back in. So anyway, thank you for having me. Let you know that my home group is the Came to Believe group, and it's probably the best home group in the whole wide world. It is for me. We meet on Tuesdays and Fridays. My wife went to the meeting tonight to let them know where I was, so that I'm checking in with them. But our meeting is going on between 7 and 8, as we are starting this meeting at 8. But anyway, we meet on Tuesdays and Fridays, and we're a big book study group. We studied the textbook Alcoholics Anonymous from the very beginning of it to the very end, including all the stories. It takes us about 2.5 years to go all the way through that book, and we do that the first 3 Tuesdays of every month. When there's a 4th Tuesday, we study the one of the traditions. So in the course of a year, we study all 12 traditions. When there's a 5th Tuesday, we study AA history using conference-approved literature, just believing that if we don't know something about our history, we'll be doomed to repeat it. So we study AA history. The last Friday of every month is our only open speaker meeting. And we invite our speakers sometimes a year in advance. And we get men and women to come in, usually from out of town, and speak at our group. And our group grows from about 18 to 22 people up to 50 or 60 people for that open speaker meeting. So it comes and goes that way. We are an in-person meeting. We started our group 25 years ago in June. June will be our 25th anniversary. We're going to celebrate that. And our group has never missed a meeting in 25 years. Not for rain, snow, sleet, hail, or pandemic. When most groups got shut down and churches could not meet, our church that we meet in allowed us to keep meeting. And the one thing we did is we bought some Zoom equipment. We bought a computer and a flat screen TV and a mic and that kind of stuff, and we went online. But we met in person, but we would have 15 or 20 people to Zoom in. But otherwise there'd be 5, 6 to 10 people in the meeting. So forth. So we were able to keep the doors open, and we had several people just walk in during the pandemic year or so to join Alcoholics Anonymous. So we're very grateful and fortunate about that. So again, that's my home group. I can't say enough about it because I wouldn't be alive without 2 things. Men in Alcoholics Anonymous that have been my sponsors. I've had 3. 2 of them have died, and actually 4. 1 got drunk and 2 died, and I still got the same sponsor that I've had for almost 30 years. So sponsorship and home group, that's where I believe the real value of my sobriety has come from, and going through the steps in an organized manner through the textbook Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I'm very grateful to have come into AA during a period of time when you were met at the door met at the treatment center and brought to a meeting, and then you weren't left. You were carried out for coffee or for a meal when the meeting was over. So those kind of experiences are just of tremendous importance, and I try to live that way today with new people. I'm encouraged every time that I read the textbook, the story about Dr. Bob on his day off. He took one man through the steps. There was 6 of them during that time. They didn't have the name Alcoholics Anonymous. They didn't have a textbook, but they had some information and some stuff that they had borrowed from the Oxford movement, and so they were just going by trial and error. But Dr. Bob, on his afternoon off, spent 3 or 4 hours with this one guy, and the next day the guy went off to Cleveland and started a group. And we would laugh at something like that today, or we wouldn't think that would be possible. But that's just how much change has happened in Alcoholics Anonymous over the years. In fact, people back then would have no idea that we'd be sitting here having this meeting, all of us in different locations using the computer. I'm here in my home with my wife, and we're using our little iPad for this, and our screen shows all of you, and it's good to see all of you. But I think we're on about a 25, 26, 27-minute meeting schedule, and I'm not used to that. A few years ago, I was out in Breckenridge, Colorado, speaking to about a 5,000-person group, and I was supposed to be the lead-in speaker for the main speaker, and they give you 10 minutes to do it. Well, when I was done, the lead speaker said, "My friend Paige makes a good talk, a good 10-minute talk. It just takes him an hour to do it." So I'm gonna jump into my story. Let you know that I know quite a bit about my own drinking, and that's the only area that I really specialize in. I don't speak for Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm no authority on it. I've just been given God's grace, and I've been given the love and leadership of sponsorship that has carried me through the steps, and just been blessed. So, but I do know about my own personal drinking, and I do know about my own experience with the steps and getting sober and being what I call reborn. That's what the book calls it, becoming a new man. And so I started drinking when I was 13 years old, and I should have never started drinking because there was nothing attractive about drinking that I knew as a boy. My father was a terrible alcoholic, and he abused his wife, my mom, and all of his children. And I grew up hating him, and I grew up hating what alcohol did to a man. And but when my time came at age 13, I don't know what I was thinking, if I was thinking. I think probably that I thought I'd be different. I guess we all think that it'll be different for me, and it was. I didn't turn out like my father, but I had some terrible consequences from my drinking as time went on. I drank for 30 years, from the time I started at 13 till I got forced to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. And a few years ago, 4 years ago, I had a 30th anniversary. And I never thought that I would ever live sober the years that I lived drinking. I drank for 30 years, and at God's grace, I had a 30 years of sobriety a few years ago. I just can't hardly believe it even to this day, and that I'm coming up on next month 35 years. So I've just been blessed. Anyway, starting at 13, it didn't go good. I lost interest in school and got in trouble. I started stealing from my employers. I was a paper boy. I worked in a grocery store as a bag boy, and I just my life changed because I was now after money to buy cigarettes and whatever I could drink. At that time, that age, you had to get somebody older to buy it for you, and most likely, most of the time, they didn't get you enough or what you wanted, and they also took your money. So it was not a good deal. But I know that you guys, most of you are veterans, and I certainly identify with that. I was in the U.S. Navy. I love the Navy. When I left home at age 17, I was influenced by this poster that said, "Join the Navy and see the world." And I took my first geographic then. I thought if I could join the Navy, my life would get better and it would go good. I didn't know that I was just taking my alcoholism somewhere else. But I stuck my thumb out in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and hitchhiked 50 miles to Raleigh, North Carolina on a Saturday morning and joined the U.S. Navy. I lied about my age, and back then they didn't have the computer systems and everything that they got now. It was a couple of days later in San Diego in boot camp that they found out that I was 17 and didn't have parental sign off on me joining the Navy. By that time, they'd already cut my hair and given me clothes that didn't fit. And I was in boot camp, and they worked some of their magic and it kept me. I had to extend to stay in the Navy. I'm probably the only man that ever re-enlisted in his first week in the Navy. So I had to sign up for extra time. So anyway, I ended up serving in the United States Navy in what they call the Westpac submarine service in the far west in the Pacific, home based out of Hawaii and off of a sub-tender in Guam. And from there we went everywhere. We were a Polaris submarine. We'd go to sea for 3-4 months at a time, and we'd come back and we'd be off for about 3 months. During that time period, we just went nuts. All of us single guys, and most of us were single on our boat, but drinking was accepted. It was just a part of life. Looking back on it, I don't know that. I think everybody was drinking, but that's probably not true. But I thought it was, and I'm all past the time that I would be worried about getting in trouble. I'll go ahead and let you know that I figured out a way to drink on that submarine. We carried 55 gallons of grain alcohol that we used to clean with. We would take the torpedoes apart and take the gyros out and clean them in that 180 proof grain alcohol. And an old salty submarine sailor told me the secret that we could drink that stuff. The Navy told you it was poison. Well, we found out it wasn't. I'm alive and well now after drinking my share of it. But alcohol drove my life. I didn't think things through. I did all my drinking, all my best thinking when I was drinking. So when some friends of mine decided to get out, and I didn't even think about they're getting out of the Navy because they got 20 and 30 years already behind them, and you got 10. So I went with them, type thing. And it worked out pretty good for the first year or so. I jumped into the merchant service and for a little bit, and then I went into heavy construction. And then I figured that what I needed was to get back home and marry a good girl. Well, good luck with that. I got back home and I did get married, and that lasted about as long as she could put up with my alcoholism. And in that transitional period from the Navy to what I ended up doing a career in, I had always been interested in in building things and drawing and so forth. And so I went after a career in architecture and had to start at the bottom, go back and reinforce my high school education. Started with a business degree and went into a math degree and went into architecture and became one. And for the next 40 some years practice architecture. I'm currently about 99% retired, just doing consulting work for a firm that I worked for about 25 years. And then I had already previously retired from another firm after about 25 years. So quite comfortable in just where I'm at, to where once I got rescued and got, I call it being sentenced to AA, that God's been gracious. I've been overpaid in every area of my life. And let me talk about God for a minute. I might remind you that the textbook says we're going to talk about God. And so on page like 28 or 29 of the book, there's a little paragraph in there that says that every member, like I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, in his own way of speaking, in his own language, tells others about how he established a relationship with God. Well, let me just reinforce that statement with why is that important? It's important in that when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the first things they told me was that the intellect would not fix my problem. I could not outthink my alcoholism. The next thing they told me was that frothy emotional appeals would not fix my problem. Now, I didn't know what that really meant. They told me it means when your wife or your boss would say, Paige, just come to work and stay here all day. Don't steal anything and don't drink. And when your wife would say, just come straight home and let's go to the ball game and let's go shopping and don't drink. That's a form of frothy emotional appeal. I would listen to that sometimes. I just couldn't do it. And so I'm told right off that the intellect's not going to fix my alcoholism. Frothy emotional appeal is not going to fix my alcoholism. And then they go right on to say that no human power is going to fix my alcoholism. Well, that would make you wonder, why am I here? And can this thing work? And then they tell you, they hook you with, well, God can and will if you seek Him. And so the steps would take me to a relationship with God. Well, when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, after 30 years of drinking and living my life, I had never established a relationship with God. I'm not an atheist. I'm not agnostic. I just did not have a relationship that included God. I just did not have any use for Him because I blamed Him. I blamed everything that was wrong in my life on Him. Most importantly, I blamed Him for putting me into family with a mean father that used to beat us and would drink and get drunk and tear the house up and so forth. And so that I just had no use for Him. Actually, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I learned the Lord's Prayer and how to close a meeting holding hands with the Lord's Prayer, because I didn't know it. I'd heard of it. I've heard people say it. My mother, could recite it and believed in it. I just did not. So I came to Alcoholics Anonymous as just a spiritual bankrupt babe, just a pure infant and so forth. And so the steps started establishing that relationship for me. I had, by the time I was in, I'd been forced into a treatment center because my employers gave me the option or the choice that I could either go get help that they would pay for, or I could go to federal prison for some of the stuff that I had done. And I was dumb enough to say, well, how long are you going to give me to make that decision? And they looked out at me like I was crazy. Well, they gave me 3 days. And so for 3 days, I decided and considered, am I going to go to federal prison, or am I going to go to a plush, fancy treatment center and get some help that they're going to pay for? So after 3 days of that rocket science, I joined right in with them and decided to do that. But let me tell you what led to that. They had asked me to go speak to the CEO of this treatment center, and he was a member. He was 17 years sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, a big 6-figure income guy running this treatment center for this company I was with. And he 12-stepped me, and I didn't know he did that. I didn't know what 12 steps were. He just spoke to me for about 5 hours. I sat in a chair in his office. He sat behind his desk, chain smoked cigarettes, and drank coffee. I couldn't do anything but sit on my hands, because that morning was the first morning in years that I had not had my normal morning drink. So my hands had already started to shake. So he sat there, and for about 5 hours, you're giving me about 25 minutes to tell this story. He told his story and talked to me about Alcoholics Anonymous for about 5 hours. I don't remember a word he said, but here's what I do know. I know that I went to that meeting hopeless and helpless and afraid. I left there with something strange to me called hope, H-O-P-E. I was no longer hopeless, I was hopeful. And I didn't know that, but that was the second step. The principle behind that second step is hope. So I didn't know you had to quit drinking to keep that hope and all of that. I was to learn all that. So during that 3 days that the company gave me to either get help or go to a federal prison, the third day I said a prayer. I simply fell to the floor like I didn't have a bone in my body. And I just fell on the floor and couldn't get up, and I started crying. I'm 42 years old, and I lay there on the floor crying. And I don't know how long I did that, but I do know that at the end of that, I said 3 words, the most important 3 words I'd ever said in my life, the most important 3 words I've said from that day to right this minute. I simply said, God, help me. I didn't ask God to help me off the floor. I didn't ask God to help me keep that job. I didn't ask God to help me stay out of prison. I certainly didn't ask him to help me with a drinking problem that I didn't know I had. I just said, God, help me. No conditions. And that's exactly what happened. When I was able to get up, I got up with one of the ingredients of the 3 things you need to stay sober. In the back of the textbook Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about 3 indispensable things. And one of them is to be willing, one of them is to be open-minded, and one of them is to be, I can't even think right now.
Honest, open-minded, and willing.
Yeah. So, and I turned that around in my mind to how, H-O-W, honesty, open-minded, and willingness. He didn't make me honest, and he didn't give me an open mind, but he made me willing to get up and take the next right action, to go and turn myself in and go to this treatment center. They kept me 40-some days, and a man met me at the gate around lunchtime and took me to my first real meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was a lunchtime meeting. They called themselves Nooners, and they met at 12 noon. And when that was over, he took me out to eat. Later on that afternoon, he took me to a happy hour meeting that started at 5:30. I was used to happy hours. I used to love the drinking when the drinks would be half price during happy hour. But we went to a 5:30 meeting. I thought then I'm going to go home and that kind of stuff. No, he took me to dinner, and then he took me to the 8 o'clock meeting. Back then in 1989, the meeting started at 8 o'clock in person and at night, and you could smoke the whole time in the church, wherever the meeting was, and you couldn't see anybody across the table, but we had a good time. And so that was my beginning in Alcoholics Anonymous, and for about 3 years, I went to 3-4 meetings a day, 7 days a week. I'm living proof it didn't hurt me. I came to understand and to believe that if I'm going to stay sober, I've got to be around Alcoholics Anonymous. It works best for me if I'm in person, in my home group, and even close to my sponsor, and around other alcoholics. And then the real meaning of my sobriety takes hold. And so this young kid, that's how I describe myself mentally. I wasn't young physically, but I didn't know anything about God, and I didn't know how to get along with people without drinking. Drinking was so important to me. I didn't know how you could ever eat pizza again without being able to drink beer. I didn't know how people would say, how long is it going to take you to drive down here to the Outer Banks? And I would say about a fifth. That's how long the trip would take, because I would drink about a fifth on that trip. So I just didn't know how to do anything without drinking, and AA started teaching me how to do everything without even wanting to drink. And so my life just flipped over. It was about 5 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, and by that time, honesty was starting to kick in. I had taken about 5 major fifth steps with sponsors and different people, and I had lied all the way through that, in that I always held something back. And that something holding me back was just at that time just eating me alive. I couldn't tell you because I was afraid to get honest with you. And all that meant was that I'm dishonest if I can't trust you. And finally, at 5 years of sobriety, I did a fifth step that let everything come out, and my life has been forever changed from that point on. And it led me to a full relationship with the God of my understanding. Today, every prayer that I say, either privately or corporately or with my wife or with anybody, the men that I pray with, I thank God not only for my sobriety, I thank God for my salvation, because they're different and they're alike and they're compatible, but they're different. And they're two separate gifts. You can be sober and not have salvation. So, how are we doing on time? Am I doing all right on time? So anyway, I want to tell every member of this group that I want to know more about. In closing on my talk, about an AA pamphlet that guides my life today, and many other people in my area of Eastern North Carolina. It's one of our 54 pamphlets. It's conference approved, and it's called A Member's Eye View of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's I think it's one of the best pieces of AA literature that we got, with the exception of the textbook Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 and 12. And I love all the conference approved literature. I love the books about Bill and Bob and the old timers and everything. Let me close with this one little reading out of this conference-approved pamphlet. This coming Sunday, in the churches of many of us, there will be read that portion of the Gospel of Matthew, which recounts the time when John the Baptist was languishing in the prison of Herod. And hearing about the works of his cousin Jesus, he sent one of his disciples to say to them, "Are thee he who is to come, or should we look for another?" And Christ did as he often did. He did not answer them directly, but answered John to decide for himself. And so he said to the disciple, "Go and report to John what you have heard and what you have seen. The blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead rise, and the poor, the gospel is preached to them." And the gospel, they mean the good news, just as we refer to as the textbook. So, if any of you would ask me, Paige, what have you seen and what has happened to you in Alcoholics Anonymous? I would just say that my sight has been restored. I see what I couldn't see before. I now hear a message that I could not hear before. I now have the health that right living has given me. The lame walk. I'm active. And the good news has been given to me with the instructions to pass it on. That each and every one of us, you on that screen tonight and myself, we're the light in the dark world of the alcoholic. And so I appreciate the opportunity to share my experience, strength, and hope with you. And I look forward to meeting you and maybe joining your group some other time. Thank you.